Kollege López Aguilar, bitte schön, Sie haben das Wort.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Thank you so much, Madam President, and good morning to you all, dear colleagues. Good morning, Commissioner Johansson. It is my privilege to present and raise before you this oral question addressed to the Commission. On behalf of the Committee of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, which I chair, the situation goes like this. Background in summary. June the 2nd, 2021, the US administration announced that its Department of Treasury sanctioned 3 individuals and their networks in Bulgaria, 3 Bulgarian citizens, on the grounds of engaging in corruption. Of course, it is a fact that corruption poses a serious risk and challenge to the whole rule of law framework that we have set forth, to economic growth, to the credibility of democratic institutions and human rights, for one thing. These sanctions stem from the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, which is in force in the United States, adopted by the US Congress, bearing the name, as you are aware, of Sergei Magnitsky, a tax expert, which came up with the exposure of a network of corruption and gross and massive violation of human rights in Russia, allegedly arrested on unlawful grounds in an infamous prison facility, beaten to death in a year. That means that ever since Sergei Magnitsky was reported dead in 2009, the United States decided to come up with this new US legislation bearing the name of Sergei Magnitsky, the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, in order to impose sanctions for corruption and gross or massive violation of human rights everywhere, wherever in the world. And it happens that this time it is making an impact on EU citizens, EU individuals, citizens of Bulgaria and thus citizens of the European Union. Also on the same date, another 3 former public officials, Bulgarian public officials, were designated, that is the term, by the US Department of State according to Executive Order 13818 of the United States, which entails that they cannot enter the United States. Of course, all of the assets are to be frozen, and there's a number of sanctions entailed to these measures. That is why the Committee of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, and in particular the Monitoring Group on Democracy, Rule of Law and Fundamental Rights, raised concerns over the consequences of such US sanction scheme on the EU approach in the fields of democracy, rule of law, fundamental rights, and fight against corruption, which is, yes, a higher priority for all of us. As a follow-up, an oral question has been addressed by the LIBE Committee, Committee of Liberty, Justice and Home Affairs, to the European Commission. That is why we're here, to bring explanations to the following concerns. First, how does the Commission view the fact that the third country, namely the United States, considered an ally of the European Union for sure, acts on corruption in the EU and its member states? Second, how does this change the assessment by the Commission of its current approach, and in particular of an evaluation of its own actions so far in this matter, the fight against corruption? Third, what actions are planned by the Commission, or does the Commission envisage for a robust approach against corruption at state level? Will the Commission be more proactive in acting on corruption and threats to the rule of law across the member states? Let's remind, we have put in place nothing less than the rule of law conditionality and the recovery funds linked to the full compliance of course, values of Article 2, rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights, but also the fight against corruption. In recent debates and resolutions adopted in the LIBE concerns have been raised on the fact that the Commission no longer publishes these so-called corruption reports. I can remind you, your predecessor, Cecilia Malmström, being Home Commissioner, set in motion a mapping of corruption across the European Union and its member states. Yes, that was an achievement, but no continuation. There has been not a follow-up. So our question also touches upon whether the Commission would reinforce the corruption monitoring and drawing conclusions and including recommendations in its annual rule of law reports against corruption. And finally, the role of the European Public Prosecutor's Office, the EPO, finally in place, finally there, acting against fraud, corruption, misappropriation, this kind of cross-border serious crimes, combating corruption. It's also important to be further clarified given the need of a coherent EU approach in all. In this context, would the Commission envisage to develop also a common anti-corruption strategy in the EU? Are you developing that strategy? Are you catching up? So I look forward to hearing the Commission's feedback on these issues, important not only for the fight against corruption in itself, but also for upholding the Union values within the EU, of which we dwell in every plenary of this European Parliament. Thank you.